Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast with your hosts, Betsy Westhafer and Tony Bodoh. Join Betsy and Tony as they dive in with highly successful C-suite leaders who have grown successful organizations by creating a laser focus on listening to their customers and building deep customer relationships. Now, it's time to join Betsy and Tony for the Really Know Your Customer show.
Welcome to the Really Know Your Customer podcast. I'm Tony Bodoh, CEO of Tony Bodoh International.
And I'm Betsy Westhafer, CEO of the Congruity Group.
Together, we are the best-selling authors of Profitability, the revealing story of why companies succeed, fail, or bounce back. And today on the Really Know Your Customer show, we're going to talk to a CEO by the name of John Boggs. He is the head of the Brave Thinking Institute. And just to give you a little background on John, and he's going to tell us his story in a moment here, he built a successful sales career in Mexico in the hospitality industry. And in that time frame was very successful and was then tapped to lead an organization that had failed 4 different times. John took that organization and grew it into a $60 million business. And when he was ready, he decided it was time to change his course in his life. And he went back to a family business that his mother had started. And he became the CEO of that business. He's going to tell us more about that. Now, on a personal note, I've gotten to know John over the last 8 or 9 years because I've been a client of the company that he's now the CEO of. And I learned how to be an executive coach through this company. And I got to say, the thing that I love most about John is his fun, vibrant, exciting personality, and his laugh is contagious. And so if you're around him, and you'll hear it on this show as well, he starts laughing and it just lights the entire room up.
Yeah, he was awesome to talk to, Tony. And I'm really excited for our listeners to hear about some of the things that came up in our conversation. Among those things, one is their core values. They're a 100% virtual organization that's been virtual for long before that was what the cool kids were doing. And he talks a lot about how to incorporate a phenomenal culture into a virtual environment, which I think will be very timely for a lot of CEOs that are listening to this right now. Because that, Tony, I know you and I have talked about this. We believe that this culture has to start at the top. And John
Absolutely.
is a great example of how to do that. We also talk about how the employees are really his first customers, and it goes down the line who the ultimate customer is. But for him and for managers, et cetera, the employees are the first customers that they really need to know. And he makes some really good statements about that. He also talked about how they train their certified coaches to live those values on a day-to-day basis. It's not just, hey, this is what we believe in, go knock yourself out. It's, we really want to exhibit this and teach you how to do it as well. And then they're just doing some amazing impact work as an organization and making the world a better place, making a huge difference in the lives of people that are far less fortunate than a lot of us. And so he talks to us a little bit about that. So I'm very excited to bring you, the listeners, this next episode of the Really Know Your Customer podcast. So Tony, are you ready to jump in?
I'm ready to go.
All right, let's talk to John. So John, thanks so much for being here. We're so glad you could join us today. How are you?
Oh, I'm recovering a little bit, feeling a little bit both tired on one hand and yet charged up on another, just coming off a 3-day event we ended. So,
well, we want to talk more about that for sure. For sure. Yeah. Well, thanks for being here. We are really excited to dive into this conversation. There's so much to talk about. So we'll go ahead and get started. Tony, you want to kick things off?
Yeah, John. So give us a little bit more about your background. I mean, they've heard a little bit that I've discussed as we brought the intro in here, but tell us about, your background and how you got to where you are now. And then a little bit more about the Brave Thinking Institute and your role there.
All right. Well, I have I think a fairly unusual business background. In my early 20s, left college, went to go visit a cousin of mine in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico. And, in my mind, he was living the dream, living on the beach in Cabo, as you can imagine. And he was a partner in a hotel that sold real estate and timeshare and condos down there. And I just was enthralled with the whole thing. And he said, listen, if you want to hang out, make a few extra bucks, we'll put you to work. So I embarked on just in my mind, what I thought was just goofing off, really. And it wound up turning into a career. I spent 23 years down there, wound up eventually leaving as an executive, doing work all over both the nation of Mexico, different destinations there, and internationally. Became an award-winning executive in sales and marketing. That was really my forte in that industry, in the hotel hospitality industry. Left that to join a family business, that what is now known as the Brave Thinking Institute. My mother was a world-class teacher, speaker, spiritual leader, and eventually coach that consulted for people on spiritual matters all over the world, did put on conferences with led actually 3 different world leader conferences with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, spoke at the United Nations numerous times, wrote 2 best-selling books, had a PBS special. Her work was thriving in that industry, in the personal development and the spiritual side of success industry, while I was building this executive career. And her business grew to a point where she said, listen, I really need some business organization. And all of my other siblings had already joined her business. I was kind of the one holdout, and her business grew to a point where there was really an opportunity for me to add and contribute from an executive level, what I thought was meaningful and would be really an evolution of my next step as a professional. So in 2013, I stepped away from that 23-year career in Cabo in the hotel industry and became the CEO of this company. And it was, interestingly enough, I was asked this morning by someone an employee actually, that's worked in the company for many years, that we had set a vision and a goal to 10x the business. And where were we in the process of doing that? Interesting that they were asking me this. And I said, well, we are not at 10x yet, but here's the good news. We have 5x'd our results since 2013. So it's been a fast growing business, and one in which we are really thrilled to do work that for me personally is meaningful. We help people build dreams. We help them bring about whatever it is that they would love more of in their lives. And I jokingly say, in the corporate business, the corporate world, although this is changing, but the way I grew up in terms of a business environment, there weren't a lot of people walking around asking each other, what would you love? So today I have an opportunity to serve that message in a greater way.
That's a great segue into my first question for you, John. I know that you can't run a business, the likes of the business that you're running, without really having some core values and principles that you follow. And like you said, it's very different than the way you were brought up in your career. So can you talk a little bit about your values, and especially the one that we talked about prior, which is about the love and care value? So can you just talk us through your values a little bit?
Yeah. So, when I got to the company in 2013, Mary Morrissey, the founder of the Brave Thinking Institute, had a very small team, and she was able to directly influence everybody in the organization. But as we all know, as organizations grow, and the core or the spirit of what started the business in the first place, the passion that original owner had, the vision that they had, can become diluted as you move further and further out, as the rings of influence get further and further out from that center core. And Mary and I actually had an opportunity in a mastermind event to hear a woman speak that from Texas. Her name's Dina Dwyer. She did a talk about what she called living rich and the core values of her organization, a business that her dad had started that had become $1 billion franchise business, and the way that they communicated their core values in their company, which was to start every meeting by repeating their core values, in essence, almost like the Pledge of Allegiance. And I said to Mary, that's it. As we grow our business, let's incorporate a framework in which we not only identify what are the core values that you started this company on in a formulaic or format that we can then communicate and distribute and infuse in everybody working in the company. We can do that process and then maintain that through creating a format where any meeting where there are 3 or more people gathered, that we will start the meeting by repeating these core values. And she loved the idea. It took us almost 6 months to really clearly identify what the 5 that we would focus on were. We would require everybody in the company to memorize the 5, and then decide whether they resonate with them or not. And if it doesn't fit, then maybe this isn't your right business home. And If it does, then let's lean in and build a business based on these 5 values. And so we did that process. And to this day, we start any meeting. The other thing is we're a completely virtual company. So that makes it extra challenging to build culture. If you're not meeting in person, how do you develop a spirit or a culture of a business in a virtual environment? So again, the repeating of these core values really plays a role. So quickly, here they are. Number 1 is we believe in people. We know that each one of us is far more powerful and contains more potential than any circumstance, situation, or condition. So the beauty of that is no matter what the problem is that we're facing, as leaders, we can infuse in each other a belief that, hey, we can deal with this. We can overcome this. We're greater than whatever it is we're facing as a team, as we're connected to whatever, and for us, spiritual connection you have, the combination of those things is greater than the challenge we're facing. The second core value is we believe in love and care. And let me just say, every one of these core values has a core value idea and then a verb, an action word. And here's how it shows up. Here's how you express this core value. So the first one, we believe in people. We know each one of us there. We know knowingness, knowing in your heart that we're greater than our circumstances is the action. The second one, we believe in love and care. We bring sincere love and care to every interaction. We surprise and delight each other and our clients by seeking to exceed expectations and deliver on what they want. Number 3, we believe in integrity. We live what we teach and we deliver what we promise. Number 4, we believe in fun. We create joy, laughter, and fun in all aspects of our work. And number 5, we believe in growth. We grow by exceeding our goals and by achieving our goals and exceeding our best. So every one of the 5 has a framework, a way in which we go about bringing about that core value in the form of an action. And there they are. Those are the 5.
I love that because, so many times you hear people talk about, well, it's that time of year, we need to revisit our values and our mission and our vision and all of those things. And then it doesn't filter throughout the organization. And so it doesn't really get infused into the culture. So I love that you do that with every meeting. We've actually done that ourselves, and it makes such a difference when they're in front of you all the time. So that's awesome. Thanks, John.
A time I went to my dentist, and we were talking about core values, and he goes, "Oh yeah, we've got some." I said, "What are they?" And he said, "Oh, they're on the wall out in the hallway. They're so to me, if core values are something that you printed up and you posted somewhere, but you don't know what they are, if they're not living in you, they're really not your core values."
Well, and the part about it's one thing to have the value, but then how do you bring that into like the action part that you were talking about? So good. So good. I love that.
It's interesting because it's so critical for a company. You said, that your company's been 5x'd over the last 8 or so years. To have that level of growth and be able to grow your employee base from the small base that you had to a very a virtual company across the the U.S. and potentially, actually, you have employees in other countries too, don't you? To grow it that way.
Employees right now in 7 different countries.
Wow.
Around the world. Yeah.
So the keeping the culture alive, and as we talk about really knowing your customer, keeping that culture alive to surprise and delight, to care and love for, to do all of these things, and I'll speak from the perspective that I've been a client of your companies for a long time. Actually, I think 2008 was the first event that I went to, and have been at a countless number of events since then. At one point, I think I spent more than a month with you guys over various time frame over the 1 year there. But in every one of those, one of the things that stands out for me is it always felt like I was loved and cared for. And it sounds strange, maybe in a business environment, because I was there for purposes of growing my business and learning how to coach and help other executives navigate challenges in their lives and that in their businesses. So, working from my perspective, I felt that love and care, and the surprise and delight is something that always shows up. And it's something that we talk about in customer experience a lot, surprise and delight. And I think a lot of companies, they talk about it, but they don't live it. What are some of the ways that you really demonstrate that with your customers, with your clients?
Yeah. So I kind of flubbed up actually a little bit on in terms of number 2. We believe in love and care. We bring sincere love and care to every interaction. we delight and surprise each other by seeking to anticipate wants and exceed expectations. So it's really those two key phrases, anticipating wants. If I'm focused on what do I think my customer wants? And of course, one of the wonderful ways to really dive into getting the answer to that, Tony, is the work that you've done. Yes, you've been a client of ours, and we've been a client of yours. Your work in helping us survey in very particular ways our client base so that we really know what they want. And then we can anticipate what they might want next. It's a central focus of who we are and what we try to do. Anticipate wants, and exceed expectations. What do we think they're looking for in this moment? And what could we do that would exceed that expectation so that they're feeling surprised and delighted? That is if you think about that, that's not just a thought, that's an emotional vibration of feeling surprised in a delighted way. There's a lot of businesses that I work with as a customer where I'm surprised, but not in a delighted way.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
No, that's it. I think that summarizes the point.
Yeah, I think we've all been there, being surprised, but not in a delightful way. John, so I want to go back a little bit. You have a virtual company, but you were virtual pre-pandemic, correct?
Oh,
so
yes.
This is how you've always operated. And what I find fascinating is that now that people have been forced to move virtual, they're trying to figure out the logistics of it, the operational aspects of it, the cybersecurity part of it. But what you've done in addition is that cultural part of it, which I think hopefully is coming for these organizations that, just got smacked in the face with this and really didn't plan to run their company this way. But I think that what you're talking about is so important, especially in a virtual company where you don't have the chance to sit and chat with somebody over coffee or at the water cooler or whatever. So I just think that's a really interesting aspect of what you've been talking about here.
It's funny that you mentioned, not funny, but I think poetic, that you mentioned the idea of coffee or water cooler time. We literally built in, when I moved in as the CEO and started to set up the meeting structure, I literally built into our planning in terms of scheduling water cooler time. And so when we start, we've got a number of meetings that have larger groups that gather on a weekly basis. And we added 15 minutes at the beginning of the meeting that we literally do nothing but water cooler time. And what we ask people to do is share a highlight of one of the meetings happens every Monday. So we ask them, just share a personal highlight from the weekend. What did you do that was fun or funny? And then we just go around as a group, takes a minute each. And there's about 15 people. So it takes us about 15 minutes, and that might seem expensive. And on one level, it is expensive. But if you're not paying for an office, if you're not paying for electricity, you can afford to dedicate a little bit of time. And it's super important that people feel connected, that there's another human being on the other side of that screen that's living a life, and their work matters to you and your work matters to them. And what does it matter for beyond the bottom line or the dollar that we're generating as a business? And one of those ways it matters is the personal lives we're building. So we build that water cooler time into our meetings.
Well, and I can imagine that creates exceptional loyalty among your employees to feel valued like that. So let's talk about that. We had a chance to chat briefly last week, and you mentioned something about your customers and employees being the first, or your employees being the first people that you really need to serve.
Yeah, well, I just find the work that you're doing, the two of you, and this idea of really knowing your customer is such an important piece of work. So I just want to say I'm just so grateful to be here and to be able to connect with the two of you.
Thank you.
And yeah, and so for me, it really is. I was thinking about being here today with the two of you and this idea of really knowing your customer. It brought me back to a story when my very first job that I got promoted, I went to work for my cousin. At first it was in sales, and I was a pretty good salesperson. And in those days, especially, the first thing they did if you were good at sales was they made you the sales manager. And now you're going to be managing other people. But because you're good at sales does not make you a good manager. Let me just say, and I was not in those days a good manager. And they brought in a consultant to do some training, and they had all the management, me included. And I was new, I was green, 25 years old, and I'm running a team of 60 salespeople, most of them older than me. And I don't know what I'm doing. And they gave me an assistant manager who was far more seasoned. And that was a good move because the assistant was able to help guide me as well as the team. And this consultant says, I want you to write down, we had a notepad, and we want you to write down a description of your client. And I began to write down the demographic average of our company's clients. Now I'm in the hotel industry in Mexico. So it's a tourist, it's a married couple. They're in their 40s. They've got 2.5 kids. I'm writing down this description. And when I look over at my assistant manager, as he's writing a description of our client, he's writing down the description of a salesperson. And at 25, that was like a slap in the face to me. Oh my gosh, the customer description I'm writing down isn't my customer. That's my customer's customer. My customer is the sales team. And that might be a rudimentary thought or idea for most business leaders today. But for me at that age, it was a shocking idea. And it really helped me make a shift at 25 to seeing my team as my customers. Really know your customer, then really know your team. How do you express love and care for your team? And so I just love, again, the work that you're doing. And there are lots of different ways that we do that in our company. One of them I mentioned is the water cooler time.
It's such a powerful way to look at it. And I love that. And we've talked to other CEOs and they've had that same type of, perspective on things. My customer is my employee, my team, my managers, and what I love about it is it ties in. I mean, it's almost as if, John, you have envisioned what you want the company to be and you've built that. I say that somewhat sarcastically because that's what you guys do in your events and that. And, one of the things that just stands out is like, you've got the pieces of the puzzle together. We've talked to a lot of CEOs who are successful and have grown successful businesses. And each time we talk to them, it seems like they've got all the pieces there. So you've got the values with the love and care in addition to the other 4 values, but that's how you care about your employees as well as your customers, right? You've got the water cooler conversation. It's all these little things that you anticipate. What is it we're going to need in a virtual environment, as an example? What is it we had in a physical environment that really worked well? How do we deliver that to create this culture? And what I can say again, you mentioned you were coming off an event this weekend, a 3-day event where you had 7,100 people?
Yeah, we had 7,100 people from 119 countries, which is, you talk about, the name of the event is Dream Builder Live. We're helping people build their dreams. And one of our dreams was to have a global work. And we turned to each other and said, hey, look, it's happening. We've got 119 countries here. So it was a lot of fun.
That's amazing.
What was fascinating in the event is I bounced into different Zoom rooms because I'd take a break for a minute, come back in or whatever else. And I'd be in these different Zoom rooms as you guys were delivering this. And the energy in every one of those Zoom rooms was amazing. I mean, people were just engaged. They were on camera. I had my camera off for a while because I wasn't in a good setting, but I was watching other people on camera, dancing around, having fun, raising their hands. And then you go to the Facebook group that you guys had, the private Facebook group, there's all these different ways to engage and people are just energized, asking questions, taking pictures and it was a part of me, I'm sitting back, I'm like, I think I'm having more fun in this virtual environment than I did even at a live environment because I get to sleep in my own bed at night. I get to go to my own refrigerator in the middle of things, but everyone in your team that came on camera or talked to us, supported us on the back end, they all came with that energy, that love, that care, that support. So it's like in delivering it to your team and anticipating what they need, they can easily pass that on because they see it modeled. And at the same time, they're taught, here's how we do it as a team, and they get to see other people do it. So, how do you really, when you're working with your clients, how do you pass it on? Because you do a lot of coach training as well. You train. Actually, why don't you talk through who you train? Because you've got different branches in your company, and then kind of give us an insight into how you help them understand this idea of loving and caring and surprising and delighting.
You bet. Yeah. So as a business, as the Brave Thinking Institute, one of the major pieces of work we do is called our life and transformation work. So that's the 40 years of Mary's 23 years of the work she did as a minister, and then becoming not only a life coach, but a speaker, teacher, mentor around the world on spiritual and manifestation and transformational matters. So her ability to help people move from the idea of having a dream or a goal and really bringing it into being the results in their lives, life and transformation. That's one major part of our work. The other major part of our work really came from the genesis of people saying to Mary, I want to do what you're doing. I want to speak and teach and coach, and I'd love to teach transformational principles. Is there some way to do that? And back in 2008, she formed the genesis of the Brave Thinking Institute, was really to then codify the system in a way where we could train and pass on to others the skill sets to be able to build their own coaching business in the world, and in their own voice and way, take those same principles and create a meaningful work in the world. And so since then, we've certified over 3,000 coaches, and many of which have created thriving coaching businesses, some in the millions of dollars a year that they generate, many in the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as coaches. And so we do provide a very extensive training process. We've different levels that you can get certified at, that kind of thing. And in the training process, we help people learn how to market. We learn people how to market their services. We teach them fundamental business building processes. We teach them coaching skills, and we teach them enrollment or sales skills, because just you've got someone interested, how do you have the conversation that help moves them from an interested client into a possible paying customer, that kind of thing. So, and as they're learning the coaching skills and they're learning how to work with people, one of the things that we highly encourage is that they find ways to infuse surprise and delight, anticipate wants, and exceed expectations. And so depending on the program that they're delivering, one of the things we give them is, one of the ways that we help them surprise and delight is we give them very clear curriculum. In the life coaching industry, there's a number of great companies out there that will certify coaches, and they'll teach them wonderful coaching skills, but they don't give them a set of curriculum, a format that they can then, a structure, we call it, of support, in which a coach can take a client and say, we're going to work this process together. And that process is, number one, provable, reliable, repeatable, and simple enough that the client can do it. And so one of the ways we surprise and delight our coaches, and then they can surprise and delight their clients, is by this wonderful additional content that we give them that they can walk their clients through. And we teach them other ways to surprise and delight, and some of which are not really revolutionary, but are highly impactful. What to send on someone's birthday, special events, pay attention to what's going on, ways of adding in surprise calls, surprise support. How can you support in a way your client might not be anticipating it, where you're their coach and you're there for them in a moment they wouldn't expect you to be there, but they're super grateful that you were there. You had their back. These are the kinds of ways in which we work with people to help infuse surprise and delight.
John, I'm curious, going from a long career in one industry in another country, and then moving back and joining a family business that has so much warmth and love and caring for people, what were some of the things that went through your mind in the early years of you in your current role versus where you came from? It had to be quite a shock to the system, I would think.
It's interesting that you ask that today, because I just hired a new COO for our business, and so he's got an amazing set of business skills. And this particular person does have some experience in our industry, so he's not brand new to it. But he attended his very first event, this Dream Builder Live that we just had. And the look on his face as he's going through all of this stuff it reminded me of that experience, Betsy, when I first went to my, first event, and feeling like, oh my God, this is work. It doesn't feel like work. The work, the events that we put on are so fun. They're so engaging, as Tony was talking about, that I was like, is this really work? It was, and just having fun and loving what I was doing. And I was telling this new leader yesterday, seeing his face reminded me of one of the events during my first year. We had decided that we needed some better legal structure. We were not everything that Mary was delivering at the time had been copywritten, trademarked, and all of the sort of legal infrastructure that you need around a business like this hadn't been complete. And so there was a corporate attorney that I had worked with in my former career that I really trusted. And I told him, I said, I want you to come and do some work with us. And so the first step is you got to come to one of our events and see what we do, so that as you're doing this work, you'll know. And one of the things that we do at our events are called energizers. A lot of these personal development conferences have a lot of people standing on stage talking. And if you're in the event, there's a whole bunch of sitting and listening, in which the blood can pool in your ankles, and it can be grueling. We don't do that at our events. We do a lot of moving and dancing and having fun. And so one of the things we do are called energizers, where there'll be someone that is a movement expert will get up on stage to start a session, and we'll dance it out and move to the music, and they'll tell us what to do, and I'm not into dancing or moving, but okay, I'm the CEO. I guess I got to do this. Everyone else is doing it. And you, over time, even if you're not really into it, you kind of become where you enjoy it, So this corporate attorney is standing next to me, and the first energizer moment comes up, and I'm moving. So he looks around and he starts moving too. And the two of us are moving. And as we're dancing, this attorney and I are dancing next to each other. I turn to him and I say, I guess we're not in corporate America anymore, are we? It was just and he just said, I guess not. and that was 7 years ago. And he's still our attorney today, comes to our events and loves the work that he gets to do with us.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, speaking of having fun, I know you also take something very seriously as well, which is giving back to making the world a better place. And so maybe you could talk to us a little bit about what your organization does and for whom and how.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that opportunity. We, there's of course more causes in the world than any of us ever be able to serve fully, but the opportunity to choose where and when you want to make a difference is something that we've thought a lot about and looked for ways that are extra meaningful for us. So Mary, when she started her career, was a school teacher. That was the first thing that she did as a young mom, was become a school teacher. And so one of her best friends is a woman who started a foundation that helps girls specifically be resourced enough in a place in Kenya, Africa, named the area is called the Masai Mara of Kenya, where there are extremely poor villages. And these villages are set up such that maybe some of the boys can go to school, but the girls are stuck fetching water day and night. When you don't have clean drinking water, your number one job is to get water. And they literally will hike down to the rivers, and with wild animals, it's an adventure in and of itself just to get water and get it back to the village. And that becomes their life, fetching water. And so the Unstoppable Foundation, started by Cynthia Kersey, along with Me to We, which is a global piece of work, created an opportunity to, at first, drill wells in these communities so that they could have fresh water. But quickly they realized that even if they've got fresh water, now the girls don't have to fetch the water, but they don't have enough food to eat still. They're getting sick a lot. So the attendance in school is bad if they don't have a medical facility. So bottom line is they put in a 5-step process that creates an opportunity for a village to become sustainable. Starts with fresh water, a medical clinic, an agricultural plan so that they can grow their own food properly, and then industry for the women to be able to generate money so that their daughters can then go to school. And they build a school. But the whole thing started with, let's build a school. Well, they're fetching water. We need water. And then they filled in the whole thing across the board. Well, here's the amazing thing. It only takes $25,000 to make an entire village of 350 people sustainable. It's amazing how little they need in order to create a life of freedom an opportunity. So we've been working with Unstoppable, and we do at our large events, we give everyone that comes to the event an opportunity to contribute something if they feel called. And we just had a record-breaking event, and the folks that showed up to work on their own dreams and goals over the last 3 days with us, not knowing that we were going to say, hey, here's an opportunity to contribute something to the world, contributed just over the last 3 days over $250,000 to make a difference. 10 villages in Africa, as a result of what happened this last 3 days, are about to have life-changing results. I went 2 years ago to see the work on the ground, the work that Unstoppable does, and it is amazing. It is amazing. It was life-changing for me to see how little we actually need to do to make a difference in our world. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about it.
That just gives me chills thinking about a community coming together and making that much of a positive impact on the world, especially right now when we could all use more good news like that. It's just absolutely amazing. So congratulations to you on that.
Thank you. Well, we just made the offer. It's the humanity of folks working on their own lives and dreams, stepping up to make a difference that created that result. It's wonderful to give the opportunity, but they did it.
Yeah, that's awesome. We'll put the link to the foundation in our show notes. So if people want to learn more, just click below on the link to the Unstoppable Foundation and see if you might want to help contribute to that cause, because it sounds like a really, really good one.
Thank you.
Well, John, thank you so much for being here. We're about out of time, but just want to thank you. We have enjoyed this conversation so much. I really appreciate your time, as I know Tony does. Tony, any concluding thoughts?
I have absolutely loved this time, John. Obviously, you and I have known each other for a long time, but to be able to bring the work that you're doing with the Brave Thinking Institute to the rest of the world. And, in many ways, I'll just throw this out there. I started my journey with Brave Thinking Institute around the same time that I was really getting into customer experience, and my reading in psychology is what led me down the path of seeking out the Brave Thinking Institute. And in that process, I've watched how your company has just one event after the other, one call after the other, always improved, always focused on what matters to the customers. And I got to say, a lot of my early thinking was focused on learning from you, from the company, your team, even before you got there, how they were doing it, how they listened. And I took that and incorporate that into a lot of the work that I do. So it's another way that you've made an impact on the world, because I've been able to work with some pretty significant brands worldwide. And there's a little part of the Brave Thinking Institute methodology built into all of that. So I just want to give that as a thank you for the work that you guys have done.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on top of that too, because I know some of your coaches in your program, and they're some of my favorite people on the planet. You attract really, really great people.
Well, I appreciate that. And it's so interesting how life works and the circle comes fully around, because I've got huge respect for you guys and the work that you're doing. And interesting, Tony, how that your work, we've had you do work for us and helped us even refine our own methodologies. And so it's fun to see that. So thank you both very much. It's been a pleasure being here.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Betsy, I'm so glad we had John on the show and we're able to talk about the company that he works with, the Brave Thinking Institute, because honestly, we've had a lot of great guests on the show, but to talk to someone who's been there as the company has 5x'd over the last 8 or so years, that's a critical space that a lot of the CEOs that I know are listening to this podcast, they're in that growth phase. They're trying to say, how do I take what we started as a small business to that next level? And how do we grow fast, but keep the culture the way it has been? How do we keep listening to our customers? And I think John gave us so many tools that were valuable here of what they do. And maybe it won't apply to every business, but it could at least trigger those thoughts of what individuals could do in their companies, what other CEOs could do. And one, which is going to tie back all the way to the beginning of one of our first shows that we did, is this idea of the water cooler conversation, building that 15 minutes into their meeting on Monday morning to have water cooler conversation. Well, I was asked by one of my clients right when COVID hit, right when they had to shut down, he said, how do I keep the water cooler conversation going? And I think, we brought that up in a number of our early shows, just asking how CEOs are doing it. And here's a perfect example. And that's just one of the many lessons that we can pull out of this.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what I love about this interview is that it has to come from the top. They have to have that commitment from the CEO for this to work. And clearly he is 100% sincere in his desire to surprise and delight and to love and care. And I just think that's such an important message, is that these softer type things, I put that in air quotes. I've heard somebody talk about soft skills and how those really should be renamed essential skills, because this really is essential to the growth of a business. And I think he's just such a great example of somebody that's done it long before he had to, in this virtual environment. And I was frantically taking notes. There's so many golden nuggets of information that me, as the leader of my company, Congruity Group, and you, Tony, as the leader of your organization, Tony Bodoh International, these are things we need to learn, as leaders. And so I just think he has such an incredible range of experiences and perspectives. And clearly he's a really happy guy. He's having fun doing what he does. And I think that shows, and I'm sure it infiltrates through the whole organization when you're having fun.
Absolutely. Another piece that I really liked is they're very clear. As he said, you can hear, he tells the story about how he and Mary were at this other event. So they're lifelong learners. They didn't say that, but they are lifelong learners. You can tell. And he's sitting there in this event, and he talks about this key idea about the value and repeating the values at the beginning of every meeting, right? And if you think about that little step right there, it defined a whole course of action of, let's go define our values. How do we take action on those things? And all of that, just the love and care value that he laid out, and the action word, and how they do it, and anticipating the needs and exceeding expectations and bringing surprise and delight. That was probably one or two sentences, right? But it drives their culture. It moves them forward. It defines how they do business, and everyone memorizes it. Everyone lives it. And that's something that I think the best of the best companies do that. You see that, but not enough companies do that today.
Yeah, I agree. And I have to say, I'm going to go back and revisit our core values and put that action piece into it, because currently I don't have it. That was a big takeaway for me, is that we need to not only say what our core value is, but how do we exhibit that in everything we do. So that was a huge learning for me.
Absolutely.
All right, great. Well, that wraps up another episode of the Really Know Your Customer podcast. We appreciate you being here. We look forward to bringing you a lot more great interviews with CEOs who are sharing so much of their expertise with us, graciously sharing their expertise with us. So until next time, I'm Betsy, and along with Tony, we will see you next time on the Really Know Your Customer podcast.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Really Know Your Customer. We hope you gained a lot of value from being here today. If you want to learn more about the work Betsy and Tony do to help their clients thrive, visit Betsy at thecongruitygroup.com and Tony at tonybodoh.com. See you next time on the Really Know Your Customer show.